But first, this is a walrus. Now, come on, you guys. Come on, we talked about this. That's not a walrus. It's Wilford Brimley, of course. I'm sorry about that. Ha ha. All right, this is a walrus. Come on, you guys. I know it's Friday. I know Geek Week has been a long week. John Bolton is not technically a walrus. All right, come on. Here we go. We can do this. Come on. This. There we go. This is a walrus. All right. This is a walrus. You see their big tusks, right? They're awesome mustache-like whiskers. Walruses are sort of awesome creatures. Here's something I learned on Wikipedia today about things that walruses can do. At least according to Wikipedia, this is a picture of a walrus at a breathing hole in the ice. As you can see, it's using its giant tusks to hold its giant walrus nose afloat so it can breathe more comfortably. Walruses are awesome. You know what walruses aren't? Walruses aren't hot. Walruses aren't even warm. They live in very, very cold bodies of water, places like the Arctic Ocean, the North Atlantic, the North Pacific, really, really cold subarctic areas. BP's disaster response plan for the Gulf of Mexico, which they submitted to the federal government last year, advises that any response teams responding to an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico should watch out for walruses. BP lists walruses among the marine life that could be affected by a potential oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Unless BP has discovered a miraculous Caribbean walrus that nobody else knows anything about, what in the Wilford Brimley are they talking about? Again, this thing where they're warning about walruses, this is their regional oil spill response plan for the Gulf of Mexico. Which probably means they just cut and pasted that response plan from some other regional oil spill response plan that they did for somewhere cold, and they just hoped that no one would notice. Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility pointed the walrus thing out today to Reuters. Reuters then ran a story on it under the headline, "Walruses in Louisiana?" This is how diligent we have forced the oil industry to be when it comes to protecting these incredibly fragile places in which we allow them to drill for oil, from which they make more money than God. That's how diligent we have forced them to be. Look out for walruses in the Gulf of Mexico. Based on that brilliant plan, BP's disaster response for the Gulf of Mexico continues at this hour. We are now in day 3 of their latest effort to plug that leaking well, the top kill. In terms of whether or not the top kill is working, we honestly don't know much more tonight than we knew last night. BP officials are reporting that the top kill continues to go according to plan, but they won't really know for another couple of days. In addition to the top kill, we can also report tonight that BP has attempted the junk shot, essentially hurling heavy materials like shredded rubber and golf balls at a very high rate of speed into a series of valves in an effort to plug the leaking well. In both of these cases, the junk shot and the top kill, BP says it'll be another 24 to 48 hours before they know if it has worked, before we know if the oil has stopped flowing. And in the event that the junk shot and the top kill don't work, it's sort of back to square one. BP will attempt to place a small containment dome over the gushing pipe, what people have been calling the top hat, the thing that 30 years ago when they tried it, they called it the sombrero. Even if any of these things work to finally stop the leak, the disaster that's been left in its wake will long outlive the leak itself, a point made by the president today on his trip to the region.
Even if the leak was stopped today, it wouldn't change the fact that these waters still contain oil from what is now the largest spill in American history, and more of it will come ashore.
Adding to the urgency of that statement is a new discovery in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico today. You might recall last night we described the latest underwater plume of oil that had been discovered. What you're looking at on the left is the plume that was discovered last week. The one in the middle is the one that we learned about yesterday. Today there are reports of yet another. You see how that one just goes off the screen there? That's because we don't even know how big it is. The scientists who discovered it couldn't find the edges of it. One of those scientists said today, quote, "We really never found either end of it." Also, the one in the middle there, which was discovered yesterday, was described by scientists as being clear. Now, a clear plume of oil is still oil. It's not good. But the giant plume that scientists found today, the one they couldn't even find the ends of, that one they describe as dark. The submarine sent underwater to find it returned to the surface entirely black. That oil is just sitting in the Gulf of Mexico right now. And every day that the leak continues, more of these plumes, presumably, are forming. Everybody will breathe a big sigh of relief once the well is finally capped. But what then? Joining us now is NBC News Chief Environmental Affairs Correspondent Ann Thompson. She joins us again from Venice, Louisiana. Ann, thank you again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure, Rachel.
I know that you were able to travel out to Redfish Bay today. What's happening on the coast that you could see today?
Rachel, I had been out in Redfish Bay a week ago, and we went out today, and the difference in a week was just, it would make your stomach turn. There's no other way to describe it. We were out there today, and everywhere around the bay, you just saw this black band of oil, and on the bottom of the Rosa Cane where it meets the water. And then you saw the boom. There's plenty of boom out there, mainly absorbent boom, the white stuff. But it's no match for the oil. The oil is not just at the edge of the marsh, it's deep into the marsh, and you can see the Rosa Cane. It's just bending because the oil is choking it. And it was very, very disturbing, because this is what Louisiana is going to be dealing with, not just this month or next month, but for months to come because of this oil spill. Even if Top Kill works and they cap the well, that doesn't end the environmental disaster. This is going to go on for a very long time here.
And what happens to marshes that are saturated with oil like that? Presumably the vegetation that you're seeing that's being suffocated, presumably that dies. Mm-hmm. If that's holding the soil there, when that vegetation dies, do those marshlands just erode and disappear?
They disappear. I was talking to one environmentalist who described the oil, when it gets into the marshland, it acts like a lawnmower and just cuts it off. Cuts off the marsh, cuts off the Rosa Cane. And then compounding the problem, first of all, it takes away the habitat of 400 species of fish and birds who live along the coast here. And then on top of it, when the Rosa Cane goes through its natural cycle and it grows and then dies, when it decomposes in the water, it becomes one of the first links in the food chain for all that wildlife down here. Now that goes missing, and that upsets the food chain, which means that these birds and the fish are not going to have a place to live, and they are not going to have food to eat.
When we're talking to you right now, and we've been showing images of some of that absorbent boom that you described, and it's clear just from these images that it is no match for the amount of oil that they've got there. When the president today talked about tripling the manpower in places where oil has already come ashore, or was within 24 hours of coming ashore, what help is manpower? What can humans do to mitigate this once it's doing what you're describing?
Well, interesting today, Rachel, that the Coast Guard took the media on a tour in a bayou about 105 miles west of here to show what they were doing, and you could see the difference manpower can make. For example, in the marshes, they were using absorbent pads and using them by hand and putting them on the edge of the marsh and then using them to soak up the oil. That's one way. You need somebody out there checking the boom, especially the absorbent boom, but far more frequently than is being done now, and it needs to be changed because at some point it stops working clearly. Manpower can make a difference, if for no other reason than to help identify where the oil is coming ashore. And as soon as it's identified, get people out there to try to mitigate it before it gets back into the marshes. Because once it gets into those marshes, I don't know how you get it out. And nobody knows how you get it out. Some people have talked about burning the marshes. Some people talk about flooding the marshes. We saw these little mini tanks going out today from here in Venice called marsh trackers. I'm not quite sure what good they would do, but this is, and I cannot tell you how important these marshes are to Louisiana. I mean, they truly are the lifeblood of this part of the country.
And in terms of the prospect of more people being deployed down there to do the kind of work that you were just describing, I was also struck today when the president said that that the administration is stationing doctors and scientists across 5 Gulf states. He said to look out for people's health and to monitor any ill effects felt by cleanup workers and local residents. Can you talk at all about the health concerns posed by this oil, how worried people are about that, what evidence we've seen?
Well, I think what happened this week is that 7 fishermen who were working in Breton Sound were hospitalized for nausea and related symptoms. The fishermen told the hospital that they thought that they had come in contact with the dispersant, and that's what made them sick. Now, there's no confirmation of that other than they did get sick. 5 of them were treated and released. 2 of them remained hospitalized, and it is a big problem. I mean, there are respiratory problems to worry about. Those are the first and foremost problems. I can tell you the stench is absolutely vile. And then what are the long-term impacts of breathing this, of touching the oil, of touching